Subscribe to English Hub to achieve fluent English. Chapter 1. Starting My Journey. Hello, my name is Anna. I live in a small town. For many years, I wanted to learn English. I always dreamed about it. I watched people on TV and in movies speaking English, and I thought, wow, how do they do that? They made it look so easy. I wanted to speak English like them. In my town, some people also speak English. When I hear them talk, I feel curious. I ask myself, can I learn to speak like that? Will I ever be able to understand English words and speak them easily? The idea of learning English made me excited, but also a little scared. It felt like something big and new, and I didn't know where to start. There are many reasons why I want to learn English. The first reason is for my job. At work, some of my colleagues speak English. Sometimes they have meetings in English or read documents that are only in English. When this happens, I feel left out. I cannot understand what they are saying, and I cannot join the conversation. It makes me feel lost and sad. I don't want to feel like that anymore. I want to understand what is happening, and I want to join in. If I can speak English, I can also have better opportunities at work. I can be part of more projects and meetings. I can communicate with more people and share my ideas. This will help me in my career, and maybe one day I can get a better job or a promotion. That's why learning English is important for my work. Another reason I want to learn English is because I love to travel. I like visiting new places and meeting new people. When I travel to another country, I often see that people speak English. In airports, hotels, restaurants, and shops, English is everywhere. People use English to talk to tourists and visitors from other countries. I want to be able to ask for directions, order food, or talk to new friends without feeling shy or worried. I want to enjoy my trips without the fear of not understanding or not being understood. But there is another reason, and this is the most important reason of all. I want to learn English for myself. I want to grow as a person. I believe that learning a new language can open many doors. If I learn English, I can read more books, watch more movies, and learn new things. I can understand the world better. I can watch my favorite TV shows without needing subtitles. I want to feel confident when I speak English. I want to be proud of myself, knowing that I took the time and made the effort to learn something new. So I decided that I will learn English. I know it won't be easy. I know it will take time. But I am ready. I am determined to learn step by step. I remember the first day I started learning English. I was very excited. I opened my English book and looked at the words on the page. But when I saw the words, I felt a little lost. Some words looked familiar, but I didn't know what they meant. There were many words I had never seen before. I didn't know where to begin. I thought, what should I learn first? Should I focus on vocabulary or grammar? Should I try listening to English or reading it? I didn't know the answer, and that made me feel confused. The biggest problem for me was confidence. I was afraid of making mistakes. Every time I tried to say a new word, it felt wrong. I was scared that I would say something wrong or that people would laugh at me. Even when I practiced alone at home, I doubted myself. I would say a sentence and then think, did I say that right? Is this the right word? I kept worrying that I was making mistakes. One day, I realized something important. I realized that the fear of making mistakes was stopping me from learning. I was so scared of being wrong that I wasn't giving myself a chance to try. I knew that I needed to let go of that fear, but it wasn't easy. I still felt nervous every time I tried to speak English. I still worried about sounding silly, but I also knew that if I wanted to learn, I had to be brave. I had to accept that making mistakes is part of the process. Every time I make a mistake, I can learn from it. I realized that it's okay to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes when they are learning something new. No one is perfect from the start. So, I made a promise to myself. I promised that I would try my best, even if I made mistakes. I promised that I would not give up, even if learning English felt hard. I reminded myself that learning a new language takes time. It's normal to feel confused at first, but with practice and patience, I would get better. As I started learning, I faced many challenges. One of the hardest things for me was understanding new words. English has many words that sound the same but have different meanings. For example, I heard the word right. One person said, "You are right," and another person said, "Turn right." I was so confused. How can one word mean two different things? It made my head spin. I had to remember that in English, some words have more than one meaning. Another challenge was listening. When I watched English movies or listened to people speaking English, they talked so fast. I tried to catch every word, but by the time I understood one word, they had already said 3 more. I felt like I was always behind, always trying to catch up. And sometimes people used idioms or expressions that didn't make sense to me. They would say something like, "It's raining cats and dogs," and I would think, "What? Cats and dogs?" I didn't understand that it was just a funny way to say it was raining a lot. Even though I felt frustrated, I reminded myself that it was okay. Learning a new language is hard, and it's normal to feel confused. I knew that every challenge was part of the process. Each time I learned a new word or understood a sentence, it was a small step forward, and I knew that every small step was important. After some time, I started to see progress. I learned how to say hello, thank you, and how are you? These were small, simple phrases, but they made me feel happy. They were my first steps in understanding and speaking English. Knowing how to greet someone or ask a question made me feel like I was opening the door to a new world. I also started to notice that learning a new language is not about big jumps. It's about small steps, taken every day. I realized that if I studied a little bit each day, I would get better over time. I set a small goal for myself, to learn 5 new words each day. At first, 5 words didn't seem like much. But as the days passed, those 5 words began to add up. Little by little, my vocabulary grew, and I started recognizing more words when I read or listened to English. Every time I learned a new word, I felt proud of myself. I realized that learning English wasn't just about memorizing words. It was about building a new skill, one step at a time. I knew that if I kept practicing, I would improve, and that thought made me feel excited. I was no longer scared of learning English. I was ready for the adventure ahead. Chapter 2: Finding the Right Tools. After I decided to learn English, I knew I needed help. I couldn't learn it all by myself. I needed the right tools and resources to guide me. But finding the right tools wasn't easy. There were so many options: books, apps, websites, and videos. I felt confused again. Where should I start? What should I choose? I wanted to find the best tools that would help me learn step by step. One day, I went to a bookstore in my town. I walked through the aisles looking at the shelves full of books. There were so many English books. Some of them looked very difficult, with many pages and complicated words. I didn't want something that would make me feel lost or frustrated. I needed something simple and easy to follow. Finally, I found a small section called English for Beginners. That was exactly what I was looking for. The books were much simpler, with easy words and short sentences. I picked up one of the books and opened it. The first page had a simple greeting. "Hello, how are you?" I smiled because I could understand it. I turned the page, and there was a short dialogue between two people. "Hello, my name is Sarah. What's your name?" "My name is John. Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you too." The dialogue was easy to read, and I understood every word. I felt happy and excited. This was exactly the kind of book I needed. Simple stories and everyday conversations that I could use in real life. I bought the book and took it home. It became my first English tool. At home, I opened my new book and read the first dialogue again. I read it out loud this time. "Hello, my name is Sarah. What's your name?" Speaking the words made me feel more confident. I repeated the conversation a few more times until it felt natural. I imagined that I was talking to someone in real life. I practiced saying, "My name is Anna. Nice to meet you." It felt good to say these simple sentences in English. After reading the dialogue, I looked at the vocabulary list at the end of the page. There were a few new words that I didn't know, like meet and to. I looked them up in my dictionary and wrote down the meanings. I also tried using the new words in my own sentences. For example, I said, "I meet my friend every day," and "I like ice cream too." Practicing like this helped me remember the new words better. As I read more from my book, I realized something important. Learning English wasn't about learning everything at once. It was about taking small steps and learning a little bit each day. If I tried to learn too much at once, I would get confused and frustrated. But if I focused on small things, like a few words or a simple conversation, I could make steady progress. After reading the first dialogue, I decided to set a goal for myself. My goal was to learn 5 new words each day. I wrote the words down in a notebook and practiced using them in sentences. The next day, I added 5 more words. By the end of the week, I had learned 35 new words. It felt amazing to see my vocabulary grow day by day. But learning words wasn't enough. I also wanted to practice listening and speaking. I knew that speaking English wasn't just about knowing the words. It was about saying them correctly and understanding how they sounded. So, I started looking for ways to practice my listening skills. One evening, I was browsing the internet, looking for more tools to help me learn. I found a website with free English videos for beginners. The videos were short and simple, and they were made for people like me, people who were just starting to learn English. I clicked on one of the videos. It was about basic greetings and introductions, like saying hello and goodbye. The people in the video spoke slowly and clearly, so I could understand them. I watched the video and listened carefully to the way they pronounced each word. After watching, I tried to repeat the words and sentences out loud. "Hello, how are you? I am fine, thank you." I practiced saying the sentences just like the people in the video. At first, it felt a little strange because the sounds were new to me. But the more I practiced, the more comfortable I felt. Watching these videos became part of my daily routine. Each day I watched one video and practiced speaking along with it. I felt like I was making progress, little by little. I wasn't afraid of making mistakes anymore because I knew that practice was the key to getting better. As I continued to practice, I wanted to challenge myself more. So I decided to try listening to English songs. I chose simple songs with easy lyrics like children's songs or popular songs with slow music. I found one song that I really liked. It was called Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. The words were easy and I could understand them. I listened to the song over and over again, singing along with it. It was fun, and it helped me practice my pronunciation. Soon, I started listening to more English songs. I even found the lyrics online so I could read the words while listening. This helped me understand the song better and learn new vocabulary. I also tried writing down the lyrics and translating them into my language. It was a good way to learn new words and phrases. Another tool that helped me a lot was a language learning app. One day, my friend told me about this app that she was using to learn English. She said it was fun and easy to use, so I decided to download it and give it a try. The app had short lessons on vocabulary, grammar, and speaking. It also had quizzes and games to help me remember what I learned. Each day, I spent about 10 minutes on the app. I practiced learning new words, answering questions, and repeating sentences. The app also tracked my progress, so I could see how much I was learning. I liked that the lessons were short and simple. Even if I only had a little time, I could still do one lesson and learn something new. The app also had a feature where I could practice speaking. I had to say a sentence into the microphone, and the app would check if I pronounced it correctly. If I made a mistake, the app would show me how to say it better. This was very helpful for me because I could practice speaking without feeling nervous or embarrassed. I also started reading simple English books. I went back to the bookstore and bought a few more beginner books. These books had short stories with easy vocabulary. Some of the stories were about everyday life, like going to the store or meeting a friend. Others were about fun topics like animals or holidays. Each day, I read one story and tried to understand every word. If I didn't know a word, I looked it up in my dictionary and wrote it down. Then I practiced using the new words in my own sentences. Sometimes I read the stories out loud to practice my pronunciation. I realized that reading was a great way to learn new words and understand how sentences are formed. The more I read, the better I became at recognizing words and understanding their meanings. I also noticed that I was getting better at understanding the rhythm of the language. English has a certain rhythm when people speak, and reading aloud helped me get used to it. Another thing that helped me improve was listening to English podcasts for beginners. I found a podcast that was made for people who were learning English. The host spoke slowly and clearly, and the episodes were about simple topics like food, travel, or hobbies. Each episode was about 10 minutes long, so it wasn't too difficult to follow. I listened to the podcast while I was doing chores or taking a walk. I liked that I could practice listening to English while doing other things. It made learning feel easy and fun. After listening, I would try to repeat some of the sentences I heard. This helped me practice both listening and speaking. One day, while listening to the podcast, I realized something exciting. I was starting to understand more and more words without needing to stop and think. It was becoming easier for me to follow the conversation. I wasn't catching every word yet, but I was getting better. This made me feel so proud. I could see that my hard work was paying off. As I used these different tools, books, apps, videos, songs, and podcasts, I started to see real progress. My vocabulary was growing, and I was getting better at understanding English. I wasn't perfect yet, and I still made mistakes, but I felt more confident. I wasn't afraid to speak anymore, even if my sentences weren't perfect. I knew that the more I practiced, the better I would become. The most important lesson I learned was that consistency is key. Learning English isn't about studying for hours at once. It's about doing a little bit every day. Even if I only had 10 or 15 minutes, I used that time to practice. Little by little, I was getting stronger in my English skills, just like exercising a muscle. I was no longer scared of learning English. I was excited. I could see that I was improving, and that gave me the motivation to keep going. I knew that I still had a long way to go, but I also knew that I was on the right path. Chapter 3: Overcoming Challenges. As I continued my English learning journey, I felt proud of the progress I had made. I could now greet people, ask simple questions, and understand some basic conversations. I used my new vocabulary in everyday situations, like when I traveled or watched TV shows. But even though I was improving, there were still many challenges ahead. One of the biggest challenges I faced was listening. Listening to native English speakers was very difficult for me. They spoke quickly, and their sentences seemed to flow together like one long word. When I tried to listen to conversations, especially on TV or in real life, I felt like I was always behind. By the time I understood one word, they had already moved on to the next sentence. At first, I felt frustrated. I wanted to understand everything right away, but I couldn't. I tried to follow the conversations, but it seemed like people were speaking too fast for me to catch up. I didn't know what to do. Should I give up? Should I stop trying? The thought of quitting crossed my mind many times, but deep inside I knew I couldn't give up. I remembered something important that I had learned. Mistakes and difficulties are part of the learning process. I knew that listening would take time and practice, just like learning new words. I reminded myself that it was okay not to understand everything right away. Little by little, I would get better. One day, I found a simple solution. I started watching English videos with subtitles. I chose videos that had both English audio and English subtitles. This way, I could read the words while listening to the speaker. At first, I focused on reading the subtitles to understand the conversation. Then, as I watched more, I started to focus on listening. The more I practiced, the better I got. I could follow the sentences without reading the subtitles all the time. Watching videos with subtitles was a game changer for me. It helped me see how the words I knew were pronounced, and it also taught me new phrases. I noticed that the more I listened, the more comfortable I became with the rhythm and speed of spoken English. Another challenge I faced was understanding different accents. English is spoken in many countries, and people from different places have different ways of speaking. For example, American English sounds different from British English, and Australian English has its own unique sound. At first, I could only understand people who spoke slowly and clearly, but when I heard people with different accents, I felt lost. One day, I watched an English movie from the UK. The actors spoke with a British accent, and I couldn't understand much of what they were saying. Their words sounded different from the American English I was used to. I felt frustrated again. How could I learn to understand so many different ways of speaking? I realized that this was just another part of the learning process. English is a global language, and learning it means understanding different accents and styles. So, I decided to challenge myself. Instead of avoiding accents that were difficult, I started listening to them more. I watched videos and listened to podcasts from different English-speaking countries. It was hard at first, but with practice, I started to recognize the differences. I became better at understanding accents, and this made me feel more confident. Speaking was another area where I struggled, even though I was practicing a lot. I still felt nervous when I had to speak in English with other people. I was afraid of making mistakes. Every time I opened my mouth to speak, I worried that I would say something wrong or that people wouldn't understand me. One day, I had to speak English at work. There was a meeting with some international colleagues, and the meeting was held in English. I knew I needed to participate, but I was so nervous. What if I made a mistake? What if I said something wrong and everyone laughed at me? During the meeting, I listened carefully to what everyone was saying. When it was my turn to speak, I hesitated. My heart was beating fast and my hands were shaking. But then I remembered something important. Making mistakes is okay. No one expects me to speak perfect English right away. The most important thing is to try. So, I took a deep breath and spoke. My sentences weren't perfect, and I made a few mistakes. But you know what? No one laughed at me. In fact, my colleagues were supportive. They listened to me and understood what I was trying to say. After the meeting, one of my colleagues even complimented me. He said, "You're doing great. Keep practicing and you'll get better." That experience taught me an important lesson. I don't need to be perfect. What matters is that I keep trying. Every time I speak English, even if I make mistakes, I am learning and improving. The more I practice, the more confident I will become. To improve my speaking skills, I started practicing with my friends who spoke English. I asked them to help me by having short conversations with me. We talked about simple things, like our day or our favorite food. At first, I was still nervous, but as we practiced more, I became more comfortable. One of my friends suggested that we do something called language exchange. In a language exchange, I would speak English, and my friend would speak my native language. This way, we could both practice and help each other improve. We would meet once a week and have a conversation in both languages. It was a great way for me to practice speaking, and it also made me feel less nervous because I knew my friend was also learning. The more I practiced, the more confident I became. I wasn't afraid to make mistakes anymore. In fact, I started to see mistakes as learning opportunities. Every time I made a mistake, I learned something new. For example, if I used the wrong word, my friend would correct me, and I would remember the right word for next time. Another thing that helped me improve my speaking was recording myself. I would take a topic, like my favorite movie or my last vacation, and record myself talking about it in English. At first, I didn't like the sound of my voice. I thought I sounded strange, and I was very critical of my pronunciation. But I realized that recording myself was a good way to see where I needed to improve. When I listened to my recordings, I noticed small mistakes that I didn't catch when I was speaking. For example, sometimes I forgot to use the correct tense, or I used the wrong word. By listening to myself, I could identify these mistakes and work on correcting them. Over time, I started to sound more natural when I spoke. Another challenge I faced was grammar. English grammar can be tricky, and there are many rules and exceptions to learn. Sometimes I felt confused about when to use certain tenses or how to form a sentence correctly. For example, I had trouble understanding the difference between the past tense and the present perfect tense. I also found it difficult to remember the correct word order in questions. To improve my grammar, I decided to focus on one rule at a time. I didn't try to learn everything at once because that would be overwhelming. Instead, I chose one grammar rule and practiced it until I understood it well. For example, I spent 1 week focusing on the past tense. I learned how to form regular and irregular verbs in the past tense, and I practiced making sentences in the past tense every day. I also found online grammar exercises that helped me practice. There were websites with quizzes and exercises where I could test my knowledge. These exercises helped me understand the rules better and gave me a chance to practice using them. I made mistakes sometimes, but that was part of the learning process. One thing that helped me a lot with grammar was writing. I started keeping a journal in English. Each day, I wrote a short entry about my day, my thoughts, or something I had learned. Writing helped me practice using the grammar rules I had learned. It also helped me expand my vocabulary because I had to look up new words to express my thoughts. At first, my journal entries were very simple. I wrote short sentences like, "Today I went to the store. It was sunny outside." But as I practiced more, my sentences became longer and more complex. I was able to describe my thoughts and feelings in more detail. Writing in my journal became a daily habit, and it helped me feel more confident in my grammar and vocabulary. Despite all the challenges I faced, I never gave up. I reminded myself that learning a new language takes time and patience. I knew that I wouldn't become fluent overnight, but I also knew that every small step I took was bringing me closer to my goal. There were days when I felt frustrated and discouraged. There were times when I made mistakes or didn't understand something, and I felt like I wasn't making progress. But on those days, I reminded myself of how far I had come. I thought about the first day I started learning English and how difficult it seemed. Now, I could have simple conversations, understand some English TV shows, and write in my journal. That was real progress. Learning English was no longer something that scared me. It was something that excited me. I knew that there would always be challenges, but I also knew that I was strong enough to overcome them. Every time I faced a challenge, I learned something new and grew stronger. I had come a long way since I first decided to learn English. I wasn't perfect, but I was proud of the progress I had made. I knew that with practice and patience, I would continue to improve. And most importantly, I knew that I wasn't alone. There were many other people like me who were learning English, and we were all on this journey together. Chapter 4: New Experiences and Growing Confidence. After facing many challenges in my English learning journey, I was starting to feel more comfortable with the language. I could now have simple conversations, follow English videos with subtitles, and write short paragraphs in my journal. But I knew that learning English wasn't just about studying. It was also about using the language in real-life situations. One day, I received a great opportunity. My company announced that they were looking for volunteers to attend a conference in an English-speaking country. The conference would focus on the latest trends in our industry, and many international experts would be there. I was excited, but also nervous. It was a chance for me to practice my English skills, but I wasn't sure if I was ready. At first, I hesitated. What if I couldn't understand the speakers? What if I made mistakes when talking to people? The thought of speaking English in a professional setting made me feel anxious. But then, I remembered all the progress I had made. I reminded myself that I had faced challenges before and had always pushed through. This was just another challenge, and I knew that I could handle it. After thinking it over, I decided to volunteer. It was time for me to step out of my comfort zone and put my English skills to the test. My manager was happy with my decision and told me that I would represent our team at the conference. This made me feel proud, but also a little scared. I knew that this would be a big step in my learning journey. The days leading up to the conference were filled with preparation. I studied key vocabulary related to my field, practiced introducing myself in English, and even watched videos of past conferences to get an idea of what to expect. I wanted to be as prepared as possible, but I also knew that I couldn't plan for everything. I had to be ready for the unexpected. Finally, the day of the conference arrived. I packed my bags and flew to the conference location, which was in a large city in the United States. The moment I arrived at the airport, I realized that this was going to be a new experience. Everyone around me was speaking English, at the check-in counter, in the shops, and even the announcements on the loudspeakers were in English. At first, I felt overwhelmed. It was like stepping into a different world, where English was the only language. But then I reminded myself that this was exactly what I had been preparing for. This was my chance to practice everything I had learned. So, I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. When I arrived at the conference venue, I was greeted by friendly staff who spoke English. They asked me if I needed help finding my way, and I answered them in simple English. It wasn't perfect, but they understood me, and I felt a sense of accomplishment. I was able to communicate, and that was a big step. The conference itself was an incredible experience. There were hundreds of people from all over the world, and the main language of communication was English. There were presentations, workshops, and networking events, and I knew that I had to participate in all of them to make the most of this opportunity. During the first presentation, I realized how fast the speakers were talking. They used technical terms and spoke at a speed that made it hard for me to follow. I tried my best to focus and understand, but there were moments when I felt lost. I kept reminding myself that it was okay not to understand everything. After all, I was still learning. To help me keep up, I took notes during the presentations. I wrote down words and phrases that I didn't understand, and during the breaks, I would look them up in my dictionary. I also asked my colleagues for help if there was something I didn't understand. They were supportive and patient with me, which made me feel more comfortable. The most challenging part of the conference was the networking events. These were times when people from different companies would gather to talk and share ideas. Networking meant a lot of speaking and listening, and I knew that this was going to be a real test of my English skills. I was nervous, but I reminded myself that this was a great opportunity to practice. At the first networking event, I introduced myself to a small group of people. I told them my name, where I was from, and what my job was. My sentences were simple, but I tried my best to be clear. The people I spoke to were kind, and they asked me questions about my work. As I answered, I realized that I was actually having a conversation in English. Of course, I made some mistakes. Sometimes I couldn't find the right word, or I didn't understand what someone said, but instead of feeling embarrassed, I asked for clarification. If I didn't understand a word, I would say, "Sorry, can you explain that?" And if I wasn't sure about how to say something, I would take a moment to think before speaking. I found that people were patient with me and appreciated my effort to communicate. One of the highlights of the conference was meeting people from different countries who were also learning English. I met a woman from Japan who was in a similar situation as me. She had been learning English for a few years and was attending the conference to improve her skills. We talked about our experiences learning English, and it felt good to know that I wasn't alone. There were many people like me, all trying to improve and learn. Throughout the conference, I learned a lot, not only about my field of work, but also about myself. I realized that I was stronger and more capable than I had thought. I was able to communicate in English, even in challenging situations. I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to try. The more I practiced, the more confident I became. By the end of the conference, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had attended presentations, participated in workshops, and networked with people from all over the world, all in English. It wasn't easy, but I had done it. I had faced my fears and stepped out of my comfort zone, and in doing so, I had grown as both a professional and a language learner. When I returned home, I felt more motivated than ever to continue learning. The conference had shown me that I was capable of more than I realized. I knew that I still had a long way to go, but I was excited to keep improving. I had gained new confidence in my English skills, and I was ready for the next challenge. To build on my experience from the conference, I decided to make English a bigger part of my daily life. I wanted to keep practicing speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So I made a plan to immerse myself in English as much as possible. First, I started listening to English podcasts during my commute to work. The podcasts were on various topics, from travel to self-improvement. At first, I found it hard to keep up with the speakers, but over time, I got better at understanding the flow of the conversations. I also tried to mimic the way the speakers talked, which helped improve my pronunciation. Next, I joined an English-speaking club in my city. The club met once a week, and it was a place where people like me, English learners, could practice speaking in a friendly environment. We would choose a topic, like travel or hobbies, and have a group discussion. Joining this club was a great way to practice speaking in a relaxed setting, and I made new friends who were also learning English. I also continued writing in my journal every day, but I started challenging myself to write longer and more complex sentences. I wrote about my day, my thoughts, and even about the conference experience. Writing helped me organize my thoughts in English, and it also gave me a chance to practice using new vocabulary and grammar. One of the biggest changes I made was setting goals for myself. I decided to set small, achievable goals that would help me stay motivated. For example, one week I set a goal to learn 10 new words related to my job. The next week, I focused on improving my listening skills by watching an English TV show without subtitles. Each goal was a step toward improving my overall English proficiency. Through all of this, I kept reminding myself that learning a language is a journey, not a race. There would be ups and downs, moments of success and moments of frustration, but that was all part of the process. What mattered most was that I was making progress little by little every day. As I continued practicing and improving, I noticed that my confidence in using English had grown. I no longer felt as nervous when speaking, and I could understand more of what I heard. I knew that I still had a lot to learn, but I was excited about the future. I was no longer afraid of making mistakes, and I saw every challenge as an opportunity to grow. Learning English had become a part of my life, and I was proud of how far I had come. I had faced challenges, overcome obstacles, and gained new experiences. Most importantly, I had gained confidence in myself and my abilities. I knew that with determination and perseverance, I could continue to improve and reach my goals. Looking back, I'm proud of my journey learning English. What began as a dream became a rewarding adventure. Despite challenges like understanding fast speakers and learning tricky words, I grew more confident each day. From my first simple phrases to attending an international conference, I've made incredible progress. Learning English isn't just about language. It's about opening doors to new opportunities, friendships, and experiences. Along the way, I learned to be patient, embrace mistakes, and celebrate small victories. I'm now confident in my English skills, and while there's always more to learn, I'm excited for the future. This journey taught me that with perseverance, anything is possible. Though this chapter ends, my learning continues, and I'm eager for the adventures ahead. With hard work and dedication, I know I can achieve even more. Thank you for being part of my story.